So what you're looking at here is the Washington Post's version of the Jim Acosta video. This is the video that people are talking about that's been supposedly doctored by InfoWars and whatnot. And I want to talk about that for a minute because everything that people have claimed so far, at least anything that I've seen, has just been not true at all. The claim is that InfoWars sped up the video, the version that they shared on Twitter, so that they could make Jim Acosta look like he came down on this intern a lot harder than he did in the C-SPAN version, the original version. I just pulled this directly from YouTube. This is what Washington Post shared. It's their side-by-side comparison with C-SPAN, the original source, on the left, and the Sarah Huckabee Sanders version, the Twitter version, on the right. This is the important thing for you to understand. The Twitter version of the video is not sped up at any point. I've gone through this with a fine-tooth comb. This is the version that Washington Post used to demonstrate that it was sped up, or possibly doctored, or whatever you want to call it. And by the way, by doctored, I mean altered deliberately, so that it could be deceptive, so that it could mislead. And again, in this case, they're saying that the doctoring was used to speed up Acosta's arm so that it looked like he was being a lot more violent with this intern, thus, enabling the Trump administration to claim that Acosta assaulted this girl. Now, for the record, I don't think any of this qualifies as assault, but we'll get into that a little bit later. The point that I want to make here is that the claim that the video is sped up is flat out wrong. And let me show you. So there are two things that you should know about this video, the Twitter version right away. There's the obvious, which is that it is incredibly compressed. And so a lot of it looks really bad in comparison to the C-SPAN version. One of the aspects of that compression is that it has a lot of interlacing problems, and interlacing is a system that video uses to try to reduce the amount of information. It's actually something that started in broadcast TV. So it's a thing that still exists inside video compression algorithms, and what it basically ends up looking like a lot of times is that two frames are kind of overlapping. So you'll see that a lot in the Twitter version. It's perfectly normal. It's something that happens all the time when you overcompress a video like this. Most video editors, if you're trying to do a good job, try to use compression settings that don't result in this. But the reality is we're talking about a video that was meant to be posted, on Twitter, or meant to be emailed on a cell phone or something. So it's not like, this is really, really normal for this kind of content. The other thing you should know is that in spite of the fact that they are trying to make a side-by-side comparison, the Washington Post actually didn't do a great job syncing these two videos. In fact, they start 2 frames off of one another. But here's the important thing. That's fine, because we can still look at the speed. So if you know that it starts 2 frames behind, then at the next key point that you want to look at, you should be seeing 2 frames later happening in the Twitter version, which is exactly what we see. So let's get into this a little bit. It's actually a very short video clip. It's only about 3 seconds long, 3.5 seconds. And what you see in it is basically the key moment. And the key moment is, the intern trying to take the mic away from Acosta putting his left arm down on the intern's right arm, and then pushing that arm sort of down, and then they struggle just a tiny bit, and then the intern lets go, and then she kind of looks back at Trump. That's the whole thing that happens. So let's look at the key moments here, because I think that the 2 key moments that are really important are, first, when Acosta actually touches the intern's arm in the first place, which in the C-SPAN video happens at 0 seconds and 19 frames. And then the next key moment is where Acosta has pushed the intern's arm down to what I'm going to call its lowest point. And then once the intern's arm starts coming back, that's where we know Acosta has sort of let up whatever force he was using on the intern's arm to push her away. So those are the 2 main beats. Again, the first contact in the C-SPAN video starts at 19 frames. The lowest point in the C-SPAN video happens at 1 second exactly, which is 30 frames. So 11 frames of motion, basically, is all that we're looking at. So here's the thing. When you look at the Twitter video, what happens? Well, again, we're 2 frames behind to begin with. So as you can see, we can go through this. You can see how it just consistently 2 frames behind. I think a really key moment to look at is you see the intern's right arm looks like it's sort of making contact with the reporter's arm that's raised in the foreground. And then 2 frames later, the same thing happens in the Twitter version. So this happens throughout. It happens all the way to 19 frames, where Jim Acosta makes first contact with the intern's arm, and then just like clockwork, 2 frames later, he makes contact with her arm on the Twitter version. So the point I want to make here, I want to stop for a second and just be really clear about this. In no way has any frame been taken out. Up until this point, these 2 videos are exactly the same. But this is the core moment. This is where you'd want to make it look like he was slashing down faster, right? But it's not moving any faster. It's just the same speed. So that's point 1. It's already not true that anybody cut anything out of this. At least not the versions I'm looking at, not the versions that the Washington Post shared. Because again, this is Washington Post. This isn't me playing around with this. The next important thing, like I said, is where Acosta pushes the intern's arm down to its lowest point. And this is where things do get a little bit off. And you start to see the shift in what's going on here. You know, if it were consistent and if it were not any different at all at this point, we would still expect it to be 2 frames off because it's just out of sync. Instead, that happens in the Twitter version 5 frames later. Well, 7 frames, actually. So this is the 2 that I would expect, but then it's delayed by an additional 5 frames. Now, some of the people said, oh, this is because there are duplicated frames, and somebody went in there and tried to copy frames to make up for the speed, the added speed that they made earlier. Okay, once again, there is no additional speed earlier. Happens at exactly the same speed, so that doesn't make any sense. And additionally, there's no intentionally duplicated frame. It's just that the time between frames, you can just start to see that it's stretching. And this is a thing that also happens a lot with really poor compression. It especially happens where you're trying to compress something really deeply using keyframe compression. And there's other forms of variable frame rate compression that you can use. And more importantly, which are frequently used when you're looking at converting things to GIF or converting things to, phone formats like 3GP or stuff like that. And it's honestly, it's a common feature of anything that's like an online based compressor. And there are a lot of them out there. I mean, there are free online video converters that you can just go to a website, plug in a video that you've made on your phone or that you just have stored on your phone, and they tend to be real bad. Like, they tend to compress the video a lot, but the result is data loss, right? That's the whole point, is that you're eliminating data to shrink the file size so that the file size is really small, so that it's quick to upload or share with your friends, or, you can post it to, you can email it or whatever, right? So this is all pretty normal. But going back to the point, the Acosta video, the Twitter version, is actually slower at the end of that motion by 5 extra frames. So again, if you were doctoring this and you wanted to make it look like Acosta was, really hammering on this girl, you wouldn't slow it down. You would speed it up. So the doctoring claim makes very, very little sense. Now, somebody asked me also, well, why is it only at that moment? It's not only at that moment. The Twitter video gets progressively more and more out of sync the farther you go. So like I said, this is only a 3.5 second clip. It's in this case, it is 106 frames total. So out of 106 frames, we have several frames throughout that are a little bit slower, and it keeps happening through the end of the video. So you can actually see it get worse and more out of sync over time. Once again, I will tell you, this is entirely normal. This happens anytime you try to overcompress a video. Honestly, this is really silly. Like this is like the least amount of news that I've ever heard. But it's annoying to me because as a producer and as an editor and somebody who's been doing this kind of work for 15 years, it's really frustrating to watch people make claims that the facts simply do not support. Like there is no evidence that this was doctored. And the specific claims of how it would have been doctored run completely the opposite of the actual evidence. Again, the idea is that this video has been edited so that Acosta is sped up, but the only thing that happens in this video is that the Twitter version is a little slower. And to be honest, it's so negligible that most people are not going to be able to tell the difference anyway. I can usually spot one frame that's off or two frames that's off pretty easily. I've been doing this a long time. Most people, including most of the people that have ever worked for me, can't see that at all. And so that's even professionals or people who are aspiring to be professionals, like actually can't see the differences between these two things. Lay people, for the most part, like really can't see any of this. So look, here's the thing. Again, I don't believe that this is a video of Acosta assaulting anybody. He's kind of being a dick. He's trying to hang on to the mic when the person who's actually charged with passing the mic to different people is trying to get it back. I've attended events, I've produced events where that has happened, and I've been annoyed by it, but it's not assault. It's fine. However, the important point for me here is that there is absolutely no difference between these two videos in a meaningful sense. There's no cuts, there's no, shift in perspective, there's no visual effects that have been added. Like, it's just the same video, only one is compressed really poorly. That's it. My mind is blown by the idea that we're seeing people quoted as quote unquote video experts going on, at CNN, wherever, saying that this was doctored. It wasn't. There's no evidence for that at all.